The rain hit hard against the metal ground of Varel's junklands. Wind howled between the broken ships and old machines. No one came here. No one wanted to, except Darren. He was a human, tall, quiet, and strong. He lived alone in a small repair shop just outside the trade zone. Every few days he searched the junklands for parts to fix and sell. But that day, something felt different. As Darren walked through the mud, his boots made wet splashes. The sky was dark, the kind of dark that made even machines look like shadows. He adjusted his hood and moved deeper into the wreckage. Then, he heard it, a sound, soft, broken, a whimper. He stopped and listened again, another cry, faint and scared. His eyes narrowed. He stepped carefully over a rusted beam, followed the noise, and pushed aside a pile of scrap metal. And then, he saw her. At first, Darren thought it was a pile of cloth, but it moved. It was a woman. No, an alien woman. She was lying in the mud, covered from head to toe in filth. Her hair was soaked, full of dirt. Her arms were thin, too thin. Her clothes were torn, barely holding together. Her body shivered and her lips moved as if trying to speak, but no sound came. Darren stepped closer. Her eyes opened slowly. They were large, glowing, but full of fear. He raised his hands gently. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said in a calm voice. She didn't move, just stared. Rain poured harder. Lightning flashed. Darren knew she would die if left here. She was freezing, weak, maybe dying already. He took off his jacket and gently placed it over her. She flinched. "It's okay," he whispered. "Let's get you out of here." He lifted her carefully. She was so light. Her skin was cold as ice. She didn't fight, but she didn't help either. Her head rested against his chest and her eyes slowly closed. Darren carried her through the storm back to his workshop. His shelter was warm, small but filled with tools, blankets, and power. He laid her on a soft bench near the heater. Steam rose from her wet clothes. He looked at her again. Mud covered most of her face, but even then she looked young. Maybe his age, maybe younger. Darren took a cloth, soaked it in warm water, and gently wiped her forehead. The mud slowly came off. Underneath, her skin was smooth, pale blue with light silver patterns. Not like any alien he had ever seen before. Beautiful, but broken. He cleaned her arms. There were marks, red, deep, like someone had chained her wrists. He frowned. Who would leave her like this? She moved suddenly. Her eyes opened wide. She looked around, scared. "You're safe," Darren said. "No one's going to hurt you here." She stared at him. Her lips moved again. One word. "Why?" He paused. "No one deserves to die in the mud," he said simply. She blinked, and her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Hours passed. She didn't speak again. Darren gave her soup, but she only drank a little. He offered her a blanket, and she held it like a shield. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But she didn't try to run. Darren sat across the room, not watching too closely. He worked on a broken drone, but his eyes kept going back to her. Who was she? Where did she come from, and why did someone leave her in the dirt like trash? As night fell, the storm outside grew louder. The wind shook the walls, but inside it was warm and still. Darren turned off the lights, leaving only a small glow near the heater. She was watching him. Before going to sleep, he said one last thing. "If you need anything, just speak." He turned away. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, in a whisper so soft it almost wasn't there, she spoke. "Thank you." Darren smiled in the dark. He didn't know who she was, but he knew one thing. This stranger in the rain wasn't just anyone. She had a story, and it was only just beginning. Rain still tapped softly on the roof as morning light broke through the metal cracks of Darren's shelter. The storm outside was fading, but something inside the shelter had already changed. She was still asleep, curled up under a thick blanket, breathing slow, holding it like it was her only shield from the world. Her silver-blue skin looked cleaner now, but dirt still clung to her hair and dry mud still covered her legs and hands. Darren stood a few steps away, holding a small towel in one hand and a bowl of warm water in the other. He had cleaned machines, his whole life, fixed broken things. But he had never cared for someone broken like this. He moved carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. Her ears twitched slightly when he knelt beside her, but she didn't open her eyes. "It's okay," he whispered. "Let's clean this up." He dipped the towel and began wiping her arms. The mud peeled away slowly, revealing marks underneath. Scars that told a painful story. Some were fresh, others were old. He noticed bruises on her ribs like someone had kicked her while she was already down. Who did this to her? Her hand twitched. She opened her eyes. But this time, she didn't pull away. She looked into his face as he wiped her palm, then her fingers. Her voice was barely a breath. "You are human?" He nodded. "Name's Darren. I fix things." She looked away, embarrassed. "I am dirty." Darren smiled kindly. "Not anymore." It took time. He brought a small basin near the heater, filled it with warm water, and invited her to wash. She hesitated. Her eyes showed shame, fear, and something deeper, like she wasn't used to being seen as human. "I'll wait outside," Darren said. "Take your time." He left her alone. Behind the curtain, he heard the soft sound of water splashing, then quiet sobs. When he returned later, she was sitting in a clean, oversized shirt, her muddy clothes set aside. Her silver-blue skin glowed softly in the low light, and her white hair was now smooth, though still damp. But her eyes were red from crying. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "I feel strange. I am not used to warmth." That sentence hit Darren hard. Not used to warmth? He made her a warm meal. She held the bowl with both hands like it was a gift from another world. As she ate slowly, Darren sat across from her and finally asked, "What's your name?" She paused. Her lips trembled. Liara. It was a beautiful name, but she said it like it hurt. Darren didn't push her for more. He let her rest. He cleaned her wounds. He gave her a place to sleep, real food, and clothes without holes. It was simple, but to Liara, it was more than kindness. It was confusing. The next night, she finally spoke again. "No one has ever touched me with care." Darren looked at her surprised. "Not even your family?" She shook her head. "I was born in the slave colonies of Virel 4. My kind is bred for one purpose: obedience. I was trained to serve, punished when I spoke out. Then I was discarded." "Discarded?" She nodded slowly. "They said I was too weak to be useful, so they dropped me in the junklands." Darren clenched his fists. She had been thrown away like garbage and left to die in the mud. But now she was here, alive, breathing, eating, and no longer covered in filth. "You're not weak," Darren said firmly. "You don't know me," she replied softly. "Maybe not. But I know trash when I see it. And you're not it." Later that night, Liara did something unexpected. As Darren worked on a broken scanner, she quietly brought him a cloth and helped wipe the dust off some tools. She didn't say anything. She just stood beside him, gently cleaning the same way. He had cleaned her. It wasn't much, but it meant everything. She was trying to feel useful, trying to heal. Darren smiled, not saying a word. He let her help. She was no longer the lost creature in the rain. She was Liara now, and she had taken the first step back toward being whole. Liara stood by the window, silent, Outside, the stars had returned. The sky over Varel's junklands was now calm, the rainstorm only a memory. But inside her heart, the storm had not ended. It was Darren's third day with her. She had eaten, she had washed, she had spoken a little more. But she never smiled. Her hand still trembled when he got too close, and at night, she hardly slept. She just stared at the ceiling like she was waiting for someone to break down the door. Darren noticed, but he didn't ask questions. He gave her space, showed her kindness, and left small things beside her bed: soft clothes, warm food, clean water. One evening, as Darren worked at the back of the workshop, Liara walked to the door quietly. She didn't run. She tiptoed, her body still hurt. But she moved fast. Outside, the wind was sharp, cold. She wrapped herself in a rough cloak and kept walking into the scrapyard. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew one thing: she couldn't stay. Liara's thoughts raced. He's kind, now, but how long until he changes? How long before he locks me up like the others did? Someone always wants something. That was what she'd learned all her life. So she walked and walked. But her legs gave out just 2 miles from the shelter. She collapsed near a broken transport ship, coughing, her vision going blurry. The cold sliced through her bones. Her skin, still healing, cracked open again. Blood touched the dust. She curled into a ball and whispered to herself, "I don't want to be owned again." Back at the shelter, Darren dropped his tools when he noticed the door slightly open. His heart sank. "Liara?" No answer. He grabbed a scanner and his jacket and ran out into the dark. He didn't need to go far. The scanner blinked. Life signal. Head. He found her lying near the scrap piles, shaking, her fingers blue from the cold. Darren fell to his knees. "Liara, what were you thinking?" Her eyes opened. Her voice was weak. "I didn't want to be your problem." "You're not a problem," he growled. "You're hurt. You need help." No one helps without a price. Darren stared at her. His voice dropped. "I'm not asking for anything." "Why?" "Because no one helped me once," he said softly. "I almost died in a factory fire when I was young. Everyone ran, except one stranger. He pulled me out and left. Didn't even give his name. I promised myself that day, if I could ever do the same, I would." He gently lifted her into his arms again. "You don't owe me anything, Liara. But don't run. Not when you've just started healing." She didn't speak again that night. But the next morning, as she lay in bed, she asked, "Why didn't you chain me? Everyone else did." Darren replied, "Because I'm not like everyone else." She turned to face him. There was something new in her eyes. Not fear, not anger, just confusion. Later that day, Liara found a mirror in the storage corner. She stared at her reflection. Her face was thin but no longer covered in dirt. The bruises were fading. Her hair was no longer wild. Her silver blue skin glowed faintly in the sunlight. She didn't look like the slave they had called useless. She looked alive. She touched her face gently, then whispered, "Who am I now?" That evening, Darren walked in and handed her something. Small box. She opened it carefully. Inside was a metal bracelet, simple, made from junk parts, but shaped perfectly for her wrist. Not tight, not locked. She looked at him. "What is this?" "It's not a collar," he said. "It's yours, something you choose to wear. Or not." Liara held it close, and for the first time, she smiled. She had tried to escape, but what she found was something scarier than chains. Freedom. And now she wasn't sure she wanted to run ever again. The wind was quiet outside, but something stirred inside Darren's workshop. A mystery, a question, a secret that had been hiding under Liara's silence. Darren had learned not to push her, but that morning, as she leaned over the table trying to help him sort wires, she winced and gripped her shoulder. Her shirt slipped slightly, revealing a strange shimmer on her upper back. Just for a second. But Darren saw it. A symbol, glowing faintly, not a bruise, not a scar, something else. He didn't say anything at first, but it haunted his mind. That night, after Liara went to bed, Darren searched his old alien symbol files, charts he had downloaded years ago from smuggler networks and traders. He was mostly a junk mechanic, but he liked to learn strange things from across the galaxy. And then, he found it, a match. His eyes widened. The symbol on Liara's back was not just any mark. It belonged to the royal breeding houses of the Zorth Dominion, a symbol only given to elite genetic property bred for one thing: perfection, not soldiers, not leaders, but sacred bearers. The kind kept hidden, controlled, and never allowed to leave alive. And Liara had it. The next day he acted normal, smiled, made breakfast, shared tools, but the question burned in his mind. What is she running from? Finally, as they sat in the sun, outside, Darren said gently, "Liara, the mark on your back, and it's glowing." She froze. He saw her whole body tighten. "I didn't mean to look," he added. "It was an accident." Her eyes dropped. Her voice turned to a whisper. "You weren't supposed to see it. Is it dangerous?" "Only if others know." Darren leaned forward. "You don't have to tell me, but I want to help. Please, trust me." She looked into his eyes, searching, measuring. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I was bred by the high gene priests of House Vexa," she said. "They created me in a lab. I was never born, just made." Darren felt a chill crawl down his spine. "I was trained to be a sacred vessel. A breeder. A tool. Not a person." Liara's hands clenched. "They marked me when I turned 13. The glow means I'm still fertile by their standards." Darren looked away, ashamed for her. "I tried to run many times," she continued. "But last time, I succeeded. They thought I died when my escape pod crashed near the junklands, so they left. And you've been hiding ever since." She nodded. "If they find me, I'll be taken back or worse, going destroyed." Darren stood slowly. His mind raced with anger. They made her for use, not life. They threw her away like trash when they lost control. And now she was here, learning how to live. "You're not a thing, Liara," he said. "You're a person. Anyone who sees you as anything less is wrong." She looked up at him, her voice shaking. "But that mark proves I belong to them." Darren shook his head. "No. That mark proves they were afraid of you becoming more." Later that night, Darren worked on something in his private shed. A device, small, precise. The next morning, he handed it to Liara. "What is it?" she asked. "A signal scrambler," he said. "They won't be able to track the mark's biosignature anymore." She stared at him, stunned. I didn't ask you to do this." "You didn't have to," Darren replied. "I told you. No one helped me when I needed it. That ends with me." Liara looked at the device, then at him, and something deep inside her shifted. For the first time in her life, someone was standing between her and the world. But far across the planet, in a Zorth Dominion control center, a sensor blinked red for one final time. One word flashed on screen. Marked. Active. Last signal Varel 17 sector. And a voice behind the screen said coldly, "Send the retrieval team. Bring her back. Or bring back her DNA." It was the quiet before the storm. Darren and Liara sat inside the workshop, the lights dim, tools resting on the bench. She had begun to hum softly, a tune from her homeworld, slow and strange, but calming. For a moment it felt like peace, but peace doesn't last long in Varel, not when someone is hunted. A sharp beep cut through the air. Darren looked at the sensor screen on his wall. Motion alert, perimeter breached. He frowned. "No one comes out here," he muttered. Liara's humming stopped. Her body stiffened as her eyes glowed faintly with fear. "They found me." Outside, The sky had turned gray. Two black ships hovered, just above the scrap dunes, sleek and silent. They weren't trade ships, no markings. No lights, just shadows with wings. Three figures stepped out. Tall, armored, with breathing masks and pulse weapons strapped to their arms. Bounty hunters. Their boots sank into the dirt as they walked toward Darren's shelter. One of them held a hologram. Liara's image flickered in red light. Zorth-class breeding asset. Escaped. Value, 500,000 credits dead, 1,000 credits alive. Inside, Darren grabbed a shock baton and tossed Liara a pack. "Run," he said, but she didn't move. "No," she whispered. "If I run again, you'll get hurt. They won't find me if you're not here." "I'm tired of running," she said. "They want me to live in fear. I won't let them control me anymore." Darren stared at her, and in that moment, he saw not a weak, broken girl, but a fighter. The door burst open. Darren stepped forward. "Workshops closed," he said coolly. The lead hunter raised a scanner. "We detected a Class V asset. Female, Zorth origin, blue skin, possibly wounded. Hand her over, human." Darren held the baton tighter. "There's no one here but me." The second hunter stepped forward. "You are not authorized to shelter marked property. Under Dominion Code, this is treason." "She's not property," Darren growled. "She's a person." Wrong answer. The hunter raised his pulse gun. But before he could fire, a sharp blast hit him from behind. Liara stood in the back of the workshop, hand glowing. Her eyes burned silver. Energy flickered around her fingertips like lightning. Darren had never seen her like this. Her body glowed faintly. Her scars shimmered. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was done being prey. The battle was fast and violent. The hunters fired stun shots. Liara moved like wind, her bare feet barely touching the floor. Darren swung his baton and cracked one in the jaw. Sparks flew. A workbench exploded from a missed pulse blast. Liara screamed, not in fear but in rage. The last hunter tried to retreat. She raised her hand and the air vibrated. His weapon twisted and exploded in his hands. The man fell. When the dust settled, the hunters lay on the floor, unconscious, wounded, and defeated. Darren's arm bled from a small cut, but he was breathing. He looked at Liara. She was shaking, not from weakness but from power. "I didn't know I could still do that," she whispered. Darren walked over slowly. "That was incredible." She fell into his arms. Later, as Darren tied up the hunters and dumped their weapons in the scrap pile, Liara sat quietly beside the heater. "I never told you," she said softly. "But I wasn't made only to breed." He looked at her. "I was also built to protect. They gave me energy manipulation so I could defend the gene chambers if war broke out." "So you were their weapon," Darren said. She shook her head. "No. I'm your protector now." Outside, a beacon blinked red from the hunter ship. A warning signal had been sent. Others would come, stronger, faster. But this time, Liara wasn't going to run, and Darren wasn't going to let her fight alone. Together, they were something the Zorth Dominion had never expected. Free. Night fell on Varel like a curtain of ash. The junk lands were quiet again, but Darren's shelter was no longer the safe place it once felt like. Inside, he and Liara stood close together, wounded, breathless, but alive. The bodies of the bounty hunters were gone now, sent away on their own ship, rigged with a decoy signal that would send their trackers in the wrong direction. But both Darren and Liara knew the truth. This wasn't the end. This was just the signal that started the real war. The next day, Darren and Liara began preparing. No more hiding, no more running. They turned the quiet workshop into a battleground. Old scrap became weapons. Rusty walls became reinforced armor. Liara sharpened her energy control with Darren's help. Small tasks at first, lifting tools, melting wires, bending metal beams with her bare hands. She was growing stronger every hour, but something troubled her. Her glow was changing, brighter, warmer, unstable. One morning, after lifting a steel rod, her body gave off a powerful shock wave that cracked the table in half. She fell to her knees. Darren rushed to her side. "Liara!" "I can't control it anymore," she whispered. "They put a lock in my body. If I use too much power too fast, it will burn me." Darren's hands tightened into fists. "They made you with a limit on purpose." "Yes. So I could never rise above them." Darren helped her sit up. "But I'm human," he said. "And we break limits." That night they watched the skies, and then they came. A real warship this time. Huge, black, carved with golden Zorth runes. It didn't land. It floated just above the junk lands, humming with raw power. A voice echoed from the ship, cold and sharp like a blade. "Zorth-class asset, Liara. You are commanded to return. The human protecting you will be eliminated. You have 1 minute to surrender." Darren grabbed his weapon. Liara didn't move. Her eyes were glowing like a sun now. She walked toward the door. "I'm ending this." The warship sent down 6 hunters. Twice. As tall as before, wearing heavy suits and enhanced armor. They surrounded the workshop, scanners locking on Liara's DNA. "Target confirmed," one of them said. "Prepare for extraction." But Liara raised her hand, and this time she didn't flinch. The ground cracked, the sky shook, and from her chest, a wave of blinding silver light erupted, slamming 2 hunters back against the wall. Darren fought beside her. He swung, blocked, rolled under plasma shots. His tools became weapons. Sparks flew, smoke filled the air, and fire began to spread across the junkyard. But Liara wasn't looking at the hunters. She was looking at the warship. She stepped forward, trembling, as the glow in her chest grew hotter. Flames licked her skin, but she didn't stop. "I can feel it," she whispered. "The limit. Breaking. Stop!" Darren shouted. "You'll burn yourself." She turned to him, smiling sadly. "I was made to die for them, but I'd rather burn to live free." And she raised both hands. The fire exploded. A beam of light shot from her palms and pierced the sky, ripping into the warship, melting its hull like paper. The ship groaned. Sparks flew, and then, boom, it fell. Burning wreckage lit up the night as the Dominion warship crashed into the scrap dunes. But Liara collapsed. Smoke rose from her skin. Her body shook uncontrollably. Darren ran to her and caught her before she hit the ground. Her eyes fluttered open. "You said you fix broken things," she whispered. His voice cracked. "Not this time. I'm not letting you break." He pressed a small device against her neck, the signal scrambler he made. It glowed blue. Her body stopped shaking. Her glow faded, gently. She was alive. Barely. Later, when the sun rose again over the ruins, Liara opened her eyes inside the workshop. She was wrapped in warm cloth. Darren was asleep in a chair beside her, head leaning against the wall. She touched his hand. He woke up. "You came back," he whispered. "I chose to," she said softly. And for the first time, she looked at the scar on her back and smiled. Because now it didn't mean ownership. It meant survival. It meant freedom. It meant she chose her fire and lived. The junklands were silent now, where once there was fire, metal, and death. Now only the wind moved. It whispered through broken engines and scorched sand, brushing gently over what was left behind. And in the middle of that quiet wasteland stood 2 people, a human and an alien who was no longer hunted. Liara sat on a rooftop, legs crossed, staring into the sky. Her silver blue skin shimmered in the rising sun. She wore no chains, no old slave rags, only a long, soft robe Darren had stitched from scrap cloth. Her scars had faded. The mark on her back, once glowing like a brand of ownership, was now quiet. Burned out. Free. She took a deep breath. For the first time in her life, it didn't hurt to breathe. Below, Darren worked quietly on a water purifier. His hands were steady, His face relaxed. Every now and then he glanced up toward the rooftop just to make sure she was still there. He didn't say much these days. He didn't have to. They understood each other without words now. Two broken lives that had somehow healed by holding on to each other. A week had passed since the battle. The Dominion hadn't sent anyone else. Maybe they thought Liara died in the blast. Maybe they feared what she became. Maybe she had finally earned her silence. The warship's wreckage still sat in the sand, but no one touched it. Darren placed a warning sign on it. Here lived a free being. Do not dare claim her again. That evening, Liara finally came down from the roof. She walked barefoot into the shelter and found Darren repairing a radio. He looked up. "Sky any different today?" She smiled. "It's still too big, but less scary." He chuckled. She sat beside him, close. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved away. Then she said softly, "I've never stayed in one place for this long." "Do you want to leave?" he asked. "I don't think I ever want to leave," she whispered. He looked at her. "You're free now, Liara. You could go anywhere. Start fresh." She turned toward him. "I already did. Here." That night they cooked together, ate together, laughed quietly when the food burned. Darren offered her a spoon. She used her fingers instead and claimed it was more natural. Later, as they lay on old cushions under the stars, Liara said something she had never said before. "I used to believe I was made for only one thing, but now I believe I was made for more." Darren asked. "Like what?" She turned her head, looking at him with bright eyes. "To live, to feel, to love." His heart skipped. He didn't reply right away, but he reached out slowly, gently, and held her hand. And she didn't pull away. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. The shelter became a home. Liara learned to fix small things, tools, wires, even a hover bike. Darren painted the walls for the first time in years. They planted a small garden using scrap containers and alien soil she brought from the dunes. People began to visit, other outcasts, human and alien alike. Darren and Liara gave them water, food, shelter. The workshop became more than a place to fix things. It became a place to heal. One day Liara found an old metal ring in the sand. Simple, rusted, but still strong. She cleaned it and placed it in Darren's hand. "What's this?" he asked. She smiled. "A promise." He raised an eyebrow. "To do what?" "To never leave again." Darren didn't say a word. He just wore it around his neck from that day forward. And every time he touched it, he remembered the woman who once sat in the mud, too weak to stand, too afraid to speak. Now walking proudly beside him, fixing generators, teaching young refugees how to bend metal with their minds. And sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet and the stars returned, Liara would hum the same strange song she used to hum long ago, only this time. She hummed it not in sadness, but in peace, because she wasn't forgotten anymore, and she would never be alone again.